Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And sometimes I like to give out a little public service announcement, safety message that
hmm
when you're drinking your coffee, don't try to breathe. And that's your lesson for today, folks. So think about that, especially if you're driving. If you're listening to us and driving,
Oh,
yeah,
or if you've got to do a podcast intro in a second.
yes. And yeah, you take that big gulp of coffee and yeah, look out. You better slow down, folks, and enjoy the coffee. Sip coffee. There's a reason we sip coffee. We don't drink coffee, except for you iced coffee folks. But that's okay. That's a whole nother story. I can go down that diatribe. Uh, but yeah, so I was just catching my breath right before the show, and I think I got it back just in time, just so we can say hi
Good,
to
good.
Emma. How are you doing, Miss Emma Donovan? Good to have you.
Thanks, Otis. It's great to be here. I think since our first chat a couple of months ago, I've really been looking forward to diving in and taking it further.
Yeah, and I want to because this what you do centers around what we do at Tribe and Purpose, and what a lot of our listeners do. It's this whole branding thing, and so many of us, to include yours truly, are like me, a brand. Why would I? I just like to help people. I don't need a brand. What is it about this whole personal brand and branding that has really got you fired up to help people?
So I think it was when I realized that everyone is a brand and it's up to you whether you choose to own that story and be intentional about how you show up and how you add value. So we often get asked if we work with influencers at Dapper, and my answer is preferably not. We love working with authentic leaders, entrepreneurs, young professionals starting out, and really just giving them the confidence to own their story. I think that is a big part of it. I think I resisted having a brand for a while myself. I was much happier sort of behind the camera than in front of the lens. But once I realized that I could use the brand to share the message that I wanted to, it kind of shifted my thinking.
What is so powerful about like treating yourself as part of the brand rather than trying to separate yourself from the business and using that personal brand?
The first thing that comes to mind for me is just that it's tiring to try and keep them separate. I think there's a sort of natural flow if you feel authentic in your own, comfortable in your own skin. And if you're able to do that and translate that into a business, or it doesn't even need to be a business. I often say, whatever you do, your brand can support that, and it creates a really lovely ripple effect through everything you do if there is that consistency. So a lot of it for me is just that being comfortable in your skin, not feeling like you need to wear a mask or show up in a way that your clients or your team expect, but that there's just a kind of consistent brand that you carry through.
I think
I
there's
love the connection. Sorry, no, I was just gonna say I love the
yeah.
connection to authenticity there because I think for a lot of people when they think about like branding, it's almost like getting a makeover at the mall and you come back all prettied up, but it's not really you anymore. I think it's a lot of people's
Glamour
image of it.
shots.
Yeah, exactly. So, could you talk a little bit about how the authenticity ties directly in with it, and it's not at odds at all?
Absolutely. So I think just on your point about sort of getting all, going to the mall and getting all sort of glammed up, I do think what you look like and how you present yourself is part of your brand. But again, it's about what is your brand, not what's on trend. What are you expected to do? What is on brand for you, but still fits with your company culture or the industry that you're in. So just a little side note there. But I think the authenticity piece for me really came about through doing exactly that, like feeling like I had to be a certain way, show up in a certain way, and not actually feeling like it was true to me and what I was trying to build. And so I think as I got more comfortable myself in my skin, I was like, I really want to help other people do this and just be a little more natural in their approach because I often think that's when you're your best.
Well, and that leads me back to the question I had. You said something about prefer not to work with influencers. I'm kind of curious about that. Can you help us understand what you mean by that?
Absolutely. So one way I sort of distinguish influencers from what we call brand ambassadors Influencers typically represent a lot of brands, and they tend to be quite flashy or maybe come across as less sincere. And I'm not saying that's what the people are like, that's the kind of brands they portray. Whereas if you look at someone who maybe is a brand ambassador, they have chosen to align with that brand. So again, it comes down to like values and alignment and putting your name behind a brand. And business leaders often are so caught up in running the business and, you know, wearing so many different hats that their brand takes a back seat. Whereas once they just create a little bit of space to, like I mentioned, be intentional about it, it's incredible what impact that can have in their business. So it's everyday people as well as leaders, as opposed to people who choose to be in the limelight, if that distinction makes sense.
Well, and I think it's important also because in the end, I mean, we're all people and we like working with people, right? So if we
Yeah,
understand who we're working with better, there's that trust, right? And
absolutely.
understanding that trust. How do you help folks get that, display that? I mean, that because that's really what we're talking about, right?
Mhm.
Is through your process with Dapper, helping somebody display that they are a trustworthy person, I guess. So how do you help people, your clients, display that honesty of that human honesty when you're helping them capture their brand?
It's a great question. And we like to start with what their brand stands for. So a lot of clients struggle to articulate their brand voice. And instead of just giving them a list of words to choose from, we go right back to what matters to you. What are your values? How do you want to show up in the world? A great question is, what do you want people to say when you're not in the room? And by really unpacking those sorts of questions, you get a better sense of how you want to put yourself forward. And from there, we can then have the conversation around what is your voice? What platforms make sense for you to share your message? And a big one is, what do you want to talk about and why? So there's lots of different sort of schools of thought and ways to approach it, but we are big believers in share stories, firstly stories rather than
Mm.
just selling, and do it around topics that you genuinely have a passion or interest in, as well as expertise. So it's finding that sweet spot where you are sharing your knowledge, you're engaging with your audience, but you're also having fun. Because I think so much of life, it's serious and there are things we've got to do and bills to pay. So I think with your brand, you really want to lean into enjoying the process and not seeing it as a tick box or a chore.
How do you help people to deal with that like self deception aspect of finding their own brand or even their company's brand? Because it is their another version of themselves, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But I feel like the like what comes to mind is the term of like wants versus like want to wants. Like they can look at their business and like want to want all these different things, but it's like, do they really want to put on the suit? Do they really want to do all these kind of things? Like, how do you help to tease those out?
So we have a product called the Culture Deck, which I'm really passionate about because it is helping brands, and it's often the company brand, to articulate their culture and their brand. So we're not trying to shape it or redefine it, but we're going, what is it currently, and where are the areas where you want to evolve it or enhance it in some way? So I think that's a very collaborative process that, again, just asking the right questions, similar to a sort of coaching approach, where you asking questions, you kind of holding up a mirror to clients to get them to see it, and then using examples. I always find that really useful, where you give an example of a brand. It doesn't even need to be in the industry, but maybe just with a similar ethos, and say, this is how they're doing it, what works, what could you draw inspiration from, and then importantly, how do you make it your own? So just giving each person or company that like unique feeling that they are confident and proud to put out in the world.
I'd love to explore that a bit more, the articulating your culture, because that's really interesting. And, it's something I think a lot of business owners struggle with is, well, what is our culture? Well, we got a ping pong table and a kegerator in the break room, sort of thing. So how do you help them truly articulate what their culture is?
Mm. It took us about a year to develop the product because there are so many elements to it. And we're like, how do we make sure this adds value to the team? And what we've come up with is it's actually like a coffee table book that encapsulates all the conversations we've had. And what we like to do is not just ask the leadership team or the founder, but to interview people, a whole cross section of the company. And then again, find where there's misalignment, find where from dress code, we touched on that earlier, is what is the dress code? And if you've got different answers, then to go to the leaders and say, which one do you want it to be? And how do we shift that in a healthy way where people don't feel like they're being told what to do, but more that they understand the culture and why it's there. So that's a small piece. I think a big one is values. It's about encouraging companies to live those values rather than just have them on the wall or, in a folder somewhere. So it's really about how do you bring that to life and how do you use examples and use it to inspire and motivate people rather than to make them feel restricted or that they've got to fit into a box. I think it's really useful for hiring. So to give potential candidates you're employing that culture deck to read. It's important for stakeholders, for strategic partners. So it's designed in a way that really can help. Again, like I said, we're not there to create it, but rather to make sure that it's articulated in a way that makes sense.
And, talking about articulating the brand, what comes to mind for me is, I think branding, Dad, you kind of hinted at this in the intro, but branding is one of those words I think a lot of people use, but, we don't necessarily know a lot of stuff about. Could you give us, I guess the thing I'm thinking of is kind of some broad buckets to put different types of brands in, maybe 3 examples of brands, 4 examples of brands, something like that?
In terms of personal brands?
In terms of personal brands, and then maybe different types of personal brands, or if you want to use you're saying if you used a company as a reference point, that also if it's a little bit easier for people to understand, but just kind of putting into those broad buckets for people to start to see where they might fit on that.
Absolutely. So we often use personal brand and professional brand interchangeably, which I'm not sure how I feel about. It's kind of just happened, but I think as a starting sort of umbrella term, a professional brand is useful. I think the reason it doesn't always sit well with me is I like that idea of consistency, whether it's your personal life or your business life. But let's keep it simple with we're looking at different types of professional brand. And I think a big thing for me comes down to if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Because if you are comfortable out in the world, your professional brand is going to be louder and more vibrant and more visible. But I think there's such a space for people who are, like I said, I used to be more comfortable sort of tucked away or making less of a splash. I think there's a huge opportunity for those people to create a strong professional brand. And they're often the ones who are a bit skeptical or need to sort of unpack it a bit first. So I think that's a nice distinction around you don't have to shout the loudest. You can create a strong profile. You can create valuable content. You can engage with other people's content without necessarily being in the limelight, but you are still giving yourself a really strong foundation to take that career change, to start your own venture, whatever it might be. So I know that's not a lot of categories, but I do think it's quite a useful one to kind of go professional and then how extroverted do you want to be with your brand?
What about data? I mean, we seem to have been, well, at least me, been talking a lot about the data. And one of the things I've always heard and kind of seen also is you can't track the metrics of your brand. So how have you and your team devised a way that could say, if you truly display your brand and have your brand, this is what the result will be?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. It's something I bring up right at the beginning with clients and say, this isn't like a marketing campaign or an advertising campaign where you measure the return on investment. And we often say, what does success look like for you? Because that is something we can measure. We can go in 6 months' time when we've taken you through this process, do we feel like we've achieved success? So that I think is the main part of it. In terms of metrics we can track, I think with LinkedIn, it's really interesting to look at impressions versus likes versus comments as an example, where you want to start. And again, it's more just to refine your strategy and what content you're putting out, but to say, what's my audience engaging with? Where am I getting traction? And then you can fine tune it from there. But yeah, it's definitely not like an ad campaign where you can go this many clicks, this many sales. And it's more about, a longer term, broader strategy of awareness and confidence and getting your story out there.
How does the adjustments still work in that? Because obviously it's a longer term strategy, like you're saying. But then I would imagine that there's still some tweaks of, I keep thinking of really like basic versions of branding, because we were talking about like the clothes and stuff of like, Dad, you got the ball cap on. It's like, hey, ball cap's got to go. It's been 4 years. It's not working. Like, we got to shift out of that. It's not really your look. How do you still strategize or keep the strategy going forward while making those kind of little adjustments?
Great question. I think it's always a juggling act to have a big picture strategy and look at the detail. So we really try and have micro steps in the right direction, and also accountability check-ins to say, are we on track? Are we moving in the right direction? So I think that is a big part of it. Another thing is that brand is not static. So we'll have some clients who come and say, make my brand look good, and then they want to like leave it there. And I've always got to remind them that it's your brand evolves with you. So it's not a once-off exercise. It's more about, where am I at now? Where do I want to go? And what is the roadmap that's going to take us there?
Have you seen folks as they've gone through this and gone through your program, your training, and you've helped them get all this together, and they've posted their brand, they've got all this public facing stuff. Have you seen them change a little bit? Kind of being their introvertness is less, or they're more open to go out and do things. I mean, really, I think I would even just say their confidence level change. Have you seen that, experienced that?
Absolutely. It's probably my favorite part of my job is I get to see people just come into their own, build that confidence. I've had 2 conversations with clients this week who've shared that exact experience, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's very gradual. So that is, it's a very special part of the process.
Can you give us an example of that?
Absolutely.
Like they get up on stage or dancing, whatever.
Yeah. So I can share 2 sort of examples. One was a client who had never really used social media, and he started posting on LinkedIn, and a week later he got invited to speak on a panel at a big event, and he had never done anything like it. And he said, do you think I should do it? And I said, absolutely, you're ready for this. And he loved it. And it was just that sort of credibility factor that was added to his brand. He was already an expert in his field, but he had never been invited to go and share it in a public space. So that was a lovely story. And another one was a client who only started working with us about 3 months ago, and she just got a big lead through LinkedIn. And again, she's just posted, thought leadership style content for the last month, and she got a lead for a potentially, massive client that they said, we really enjoyed your profile and learning, but more about who you are and not just what your company does.
Could you talk some in that same confidence space about like how aligning all these different aspects of the broader brand come together? You talked a little bit about not really liking separating professional from personal brand because it's still just you. We talked a little bit on like the clothing or different things. Being authentic to yourself. Could you kind of connect all those dots on it? Because that's clearly the idea there, right?
Yeah. And I think connecting the dots is an important part of our role, because what I found is we have all these different personal development exercises. We have really practical checklists for LinkedIn, which I'm very happy to share with your listeners. And then we take them through things like wardrobe consultants and how to show up for an interview or a podcast. And they're all kind of pieces of the puzzle, but if you picture doing an actual puzzle, that last piece, when it falls into place, you just have that satisfaction of all that work and time coming together. And that's really an important part of our role at Dapper, is to empower our clients to feel like they understand the full picture and they can use it in a strategic way. So they can leverage their personal brand for their business or for whatever their goals are for that next chapter. And I think that's different for each client. And it, again, like I said, it takes time to get to that point. But I think the space for conversation, the space to unpack where imposter syndrome creeps in, where the challenges are, it's a big part of getting the full picture.
What was the catalyst that I mean, that y'all got together and decided to shift into that world? I mean, you've been an entrepreneur pretty much your whole life, just looking at what you've been up to, but to shift into this realm, if you will, of personal branding, what was it that kicked y'all off?
So two things. One was sort of after about a decade in marketing, I realized that I wasn't working in my sweet spot. And I
Mm.
think the other thing actually was COVID. So when I stripped away all the sort of fun and things going on around my life, I had a sort of hard look at how I was spending my time and what value I was adding. And I really wanted to do something that was adding more value to the world, and something that could help people one-on-one to begin with, but shift to how do we help as many people as possible. And that's where the idea for our 3-month online course came in. And that is now live. And it's just such a wonderful way to be able to, give people a platform to essentially build their own brand. But I think good ideas often come from going through a bit of a rough time, reevaluating life, having to make some changes. And I'm really grateful for that. It wasn't an easy year, but great to come out the other side with a new business idea.
How did you kind of get from, recognizing that you wanted to do something to make an impact, and like you said, individually and then on as many people as possible, to like specifically becoming Dapper or become Dapper? Because to me, that's one where, I think it's easy to say it looking back, but for a lot of people, that's kind of where they get stuck, is it's like, gosh, I want to help people, and I don't know what I'm going to do to help people, but by golly, I'm going to go help some people. Like, how did you connect those?
Yeah. I started doing it for friends, not charging them. So it would just happen naturally where people needed to pivot or kind of create a new something out of COVID. And I realized that I was so passionate about it. I never felt like they were taking up too much of my time, or I never resented people asking me for help, which I must admit I did previously. When people asked me for marketing advice at the weekend, I'd be like, really? Whereas with this, I was like, yeah, let me help. How can I get stuck in? And then I was very lucky in terms of timing. My Dapper business partner, Lindsay, had just moved back from London and she wasn't sure what her next step was. So I managed to sort of pitch the idea to her, bring her in as a partner in the business. And we've got very complementary skills. So she's our creative director. She designs beautiful books and brand guides and things for our clients. And my role is more on the business development strategy side. So I think that in terms of taking something from an idea to a business is such a key thing. Like, who are you doing it with? What value do you each bring? And how does that together launch into something? And then just the last point on that is we just did so many iterations of our first product. And we gave it away for free to some incredible entrepreneurs to get their feedback in exchange for taking them through the process. And that sort of slow start, setting a solid foundation, I think set us up for success.
What was the biggest obstacle you had to overcome in that? I mean, with you and Lindsay working together and stepping off into this new realm.
I think for me personally, it was how do I reduce my operational role in the previous business, the marketing agency. And that's been a kind of gradual process of, I really take my hat off to people who run multiple businesses. I found it extremely challenging. And I decided a couple of months ago to be full-time at Dapper, which it's not an easy decision to exit a business that you were, one of the founders of, but I think it was absolutely the right decision for both businesses and for me. But definitely an obstacle that I've had to sort of take some time to grapple with. And I think the impact of me being full-time in Dapper is significant of, that single focus of really going, how do we scale the business in a sustainable way, waking up, thinking about it, and just, yeah, giving it my all.
Well, we've got to talk some about that now. Only 2 months ago. I mean, so that means you spent that first month, you went through your adjustment period. Now you're actually, you're cooking with fire at this point. Talk to us about what that impact looks like. Again, because I'm sure a lot of listeners are balancing two right now, and they might be
Yeah,
debating jumping into that business all in.
absolutely. Yeah, it's such a tough decision and such a personal one. I think for me, a kind of honest share is it's really daunting to be full time because now there's no excuses. There's no, I'm splitting my time or, that needs my attention. It's really like, okay, I'm fully committed to this. So that, yeah, it's been daunting, but I think what's come out of it, which is so exciting, is getting our online course off the ground. So we took our 6-month flagship process and we said, how do we make this more affordable, more streamlined, accessible to more people? And so, yeah, we've done that internally. We have built out a 9-module course with worksheets and videos, and it really is fantastic. I'm so proud of it. And so that I've only been able to do like properly since I've been full time. So I'd say that's been the biggest impact, is having a scalable product, but one that I absolutely believe in. And just as I said, that time to focus.
How did it feel to let your baby go out into the world like that?
It is so many mixed emotions, but I think we are all, I wouldn't say perfectionists because we really strive not to be, but quality is really a big part of our approach at Dapper. So I think the hard work it's so rewarding to see that come to life. And it's something, to be honest, that wasn't part of our original plan for Dapper because we love the one-on-one time with our clients so much. And once I got behind it and sort of saw how much value it could add, my mindset just completely changed. And it's now probably the biggest focus of my time.
How have you been able to, and I mean, still obviously early on in that process, but kind of keep that passion going? Because I think that's one thing that a lot of people worry about, just to use the example, Dad, with, you with your coaching of going from one-on-one into group coaching and those kind of things. Whatever that jump is for a lot of people, whether it's growing the business to the point where now you're just CEO, you're no longer, in the flower shop actually talking with people, you get to this point where you don't have that connection to the thing that brought you there. How have you been able to keep that going, or what are your thoughts looking forward, I guess might be a better answer or question.
Yeah. It's something I grappled with a bit in the last couple of months, where I had days where that passion just felt like it had wavered a little bit, which I found quite scary. And I think what really helped me was being open about it with my team, with business coaches, and working through it and going, it's okay. It's okay to have days where you're not passionate or where you just don't have the motivation to do what you set out to do, and to try and figure out what is the emotion or the trigger behind that. So what is the shadow that is sort of holding me back, and working through those complex emotions, because it's often not a lack of passion, but it's fear or it's something else holding you back. So yeah, it's an interesting question because it's something that's been quite close to home. For me, getting out in nature is my number one priority. So I mentioned to you a bit earlier, I had a wonderful swim in a dam half an hour from my house here in Cape Town today. And that just completely re-energizes me. So I think it's creating space for things outside of work that fill your cup, and then to remember why you did it in the first place. And that sort of loops back to a big part of our approach with clients is, why do you want to build a brand? Why is it important to you? Why did you start this business? So, yeah.
I love that, and Dad, I want to throw this over to you actually, because talking about the energy levels like that, that's one thing that I know I've been through, whether it's rugby or with Tribe of Purpose, even the podcast, to where it's like it's great when you just have that natural energy and everything's just going because you're just so excited about it. But then there's going to be plenty of days where you don't have that natural energy, and you have to do the work to build that energy up. So that's why I want to throw it over to you, Dad. Talk a little energy levels on that, of why that's such an important thing to kind of take you to that next level.
Well, it's how do you get out of that funk? And Emma had a great example. I mean, she went for a swim, outside in the water. Man, that's talk about there's the physical and the mental thing about cleansing yourself right there, and making that decision. So understanding that is huge. Understanding what works for you. Some people, it may be, just go right over there to that chair and sit down and read a book for an hour, or a 5-minute walk around the block, or whatever it is, to change that. I mean, one of the one of the things that I always talk to clients when they're trying to figure out what their methodology is anything physical. I'm a huge believer in that physical effort, whether it's stomping your foot after you hang up the call with somebody that you're really frustrated with, or going for a walk, or doing push-ups, or going for a swim. All those things are huge tools to help you get out of that funk, to help you break that cycle and be able to make the choice upstairs in your head, because that's really all it is. It's your mind telling you that I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm tired, and all you got to do is flip it. It's easy to say, but it may take a swim at the dam to fix that. We've all got to have our processes and techniques, and I'm glad you shared that with us. I was also wanting to go back to when you and Lindsay came together to form this company, and you alluded to it, two very different types of people. How did you two establish the values that you hold so tight with Dapper?
Yeah, I love that. I think open communication was the first part of it, that just ease that we have, the way we communicate. We did a couple of assessments that I love. We did insights discovery, Enneagram. We've recently done wealth dynamics. And each one of those, for me, just teach us something new about ourselves and each other. And we constantly come back to that. We use the insights discovery language. There's the 4 colors and personality styles. And I've got fiery red and sunshine yellow as my dominant sort of colors. And Lindsay has earth green and cool blue. So we really tap into that. And I go, I want to lean into my yellow. So I don't want to feel like impatient and red today. Or I'll say, Linz, can I have some of your green to soften this email to a client? And so just tapping into each other's strengths, recognizing where we add value has been a huge part of it. And just keeping our values top of mind. Our favorite one is always to create space. So space for connection, each other, quality conversation, great work. In a world that's rushed and digital, we really try and just create space to stop and breathe, and fit in that swim. I think people feel guilty for doing things they love, for carving out time for themselves. So we're trying to shift that narrative a bit within our business, which is not always easy, and for the people around us.
How do you think those values have shaped either, your offer yourself, the course, or just the way y'all are doing business in general?
I think it's had a huge impact on me personally. So I think if I look back to my 20s and early 30s, I was always busy. I was part of so many dinner clubs, and I was rock climbing, and I was hiking, and I still do those things, but I just have more breathing space. So I think Lynn's definitely gets the credit there for getting me to slow down a little bit. And I think a similar work ethic in terms of work hard, but have space for family and for fun and sleep. That is a big one. You don't want to see me if I haven't had enough sleep. Um, and I think our clients are incredibly open with us. So to begin with, I was always surprised when clients really shared very sort of deep personal things about their lives. And when I thought, what has changed from being in a marketing agency environment, I think that space that we hold is a big one. And it's establishing trust with them at the beginning. So by living our values, they are able to feel like it's a safe space to embrace them, or to share their own values and know that there won't be any judgment.
Have you, and I've found this both with our company, Tribe and Purpose, and with other companies we've worked with, have you had to say to a potential client, no, you're not a good fit, particularly with the values alignment. And could you walk us through that
Mm,
experience?
absolutely. So I think we've had one or two clients where we have started working with them and then realized that the values don't align. It's never an easy conversation, but what I found is if we're feeling that, they might not be 100% happy or think it's the best fit either. So I try and do it in a way that is, um, honest but constructive, and just say, we think you'd be better suited to someone else. I like to refer them to someone rather than just kind of drop them. So like find a consultant or another company that might be able to work with them. I did have it recently in a pitch call where I just said at the end of the call, like, thank you for sharing your story. I don't think Dapper is the right fit for you. I think you're looking for the kind of publicity and like the fame, whereas we're much more interested in the like crafting the message and the confidence. So I explained why it wasn't a good fit. He said he would still like to work with us, which made it very difficult to end the call
Pen
in the
over a
right way.
check, right? He was ready to do that, huh?
Yeah.
That
But no, I'm, of course, it's always a toss up between, revenue and increasing your client base versus the right fit. And it's definitely something we're pretty strict on, is if it's not going to be a good fit for us, it's, as I say, it's probably not going to work for them either. So rather walk away. Is that something you've also experienced?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's and kind of in that same fashion. You have that first call, and you kind of, your true self says, yeah, this isn't quite right, but you know
Mm.
what? They're willing to slide that credit card, write that check, PayPal, whatever it is, right? And so that part of your mind is like,
Mm.
get the revenue, and then you step into it and you do a call or two, and it's like, nah, nah, this isn't the right fit for you. You need to go over
Yeah.
there and see those folks, or do this thing. Or I've also done this. You need to come back after you've gone through this process, because you're not ready for where we are.
I th- I think the values piece is such an important piece of that, because when you sometimes you can look like you're aligned on so many different ways. Look like you might be a great client for us to work with, all those kind of things. But then if the values aren't quite right, sometimes I think it's like look like a small thing, and so you're like, okay, well we could keep working, but if they don't align on this, so it'll be okay. Well, down the road, those things are going to come up. I've told the story before, Dad, with Cobra Valley, with me and my co-founder Elvin up there, that it was like we were like talking about turning this building into a sustainable farm. And I had all these reasons for it, and he had all these reasons for it. And almost none of those reasons lined up. But we had the same goal. And so that was great for about 6 months. And then something came up that challenged that and made the goal slightly different. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, we don't align on any of these values. And I think that's why you have to make sure you put an emphasis on it early. I'd be interested, Emma, how do you kind of bring that to the forefront? Because I could also see that being a really weird first phone call if you're like, all right, here are my values. I want to make sure you're right on all of these. And we're going to, it's like the take me to church moment right off the bat. How do you balance those two?
So for me, a lot of it is around my gut feeling and actually listening to my gut. I had a friend say once, your heart talks quietly. And I really think there's something in that, to pause and go, what am I feeling? What is the sense I'm getting from this person? And then to ask a couple of questions that get them to open up, and asking them to give examples or talk about, I often think how they talk about people in their life is a really good indicator. If you ask them about their team or their personal life, and you just get a sense of it's almost like interviewing them for a job, even though they're a client. And
Mm.
I've had that experience with a supplier, and I was really put through my paces. And I was like, wow, am I paying them or wanting to pay them? And it was a really, really impressive experience, and something I've sort of learned from, is get to know someone well before you're going to be working with them.
Oh
I
yeah,
love
you
that.
better. You don't have to be best friends, but you better at least like them enough to have a cup of coffee with them every once in a while. Otherwise, that relationship is not going to be any fun. It'll be a struggle to pick up the phone and talk to them, or have a meeting. Any of those things, you'll dread it, and you won't. You, your performance will suck.
Yeah, because they'll be draining your energy.
Yeah. Yeah. As you all grew, how did you and Lindsay, however y'all did it, how did you say, all right, we probably ought to hire somebody to do this? Because when you love to do the thing that you do, it's really hard to say, all right, Joe, Fred, Betty, come on in and take over this thing that I really like doing.
So we hired people to do the things we weren't good at or didn't like. So my virtual assistant is just absolutely incredible. Couldn't survive without her. And then we went, what complementary skills do we want to bring in before we bring in people to replace us? So we've got an incredible videographer who also sets up podcasts for clients. We have a strategist who can step in if I'm not there. So it was really about filling the gaps first and then going, which piece of it do we want to continue to execute on? I think it's one of the things that we've really been intentional about at Dapper is our clients who do our flagship Dapper 9 process for 6 months, they do work with both me and Lindsay. So that is something we've managed to keep while expanding the team.
One thing that I've been thinking about, talking about, seeing the brand as a holistic thing, not separating the brand from the person. Well, I'm really curious, how do you separate the brand from a person in a more personal approach for you? What I mean by that is I could see you, if, being a people watcher and seeing these people like, oh my gosh, Camden's brand is terrible. Really, he's doing this. And then like that could very easily become a lot of assumptions about a random person you just saw at the airport or something. Like how do you balance those two so you're not walking around just judging everybody's brand, or maybe judging their brand but not judging the person? What's your approach there?
I think it's to keep a mindset of curiosity. So I'm always wanting to learn, which I know is a big part of your approach, and to just be curious and observe rather than make judgment or try and fix things. I think it's something I was guilty of a lot when I was younger, and I'm trying not to be, is always looking at what is someone's best version of themselves and to rather go, who are they now and what do I appreciate about that? And so that's been quite a healthy shift for me. But I do, wherever I go, I am in my mind going, oh, I'd love to do this or like share this with them. And then I remember it's not my story to tell. So it's about letting theirs unfold how they want it to.
That's an interesting balancing act when you think about it, because you look at somebody and you're like, man, I could see them in a red jacket with, it's Christmas time, so sorry, red jacket with a green background, and doing this sort of thing and that, and you just so want to jump in and just. How do you hold that back? Because that's not an easy thing. Because your expertise, your talented eye, Lindsay's talented eye, in seeing all those things may not fit for them. Have you had to deal with that very much?
We're quite big on not selling what we do and rather sharing what we do and then letting clients come to us. So what we find is once someone does come to Dapper and inquire, they usually have that desire to work on their brand and to get the constructive feedback. So I think that is a big part of how it works, is we're not, we never want it to be a grudge purchase, put it that way. So I think that definitely helps.
There's one last piece, and we were talking about this in the green room before we got going. One last piece I wanted to ask about, which is like the rebrand. You're talking about being excited about us rebranding and how it can breathe some fresh air into things. What are your thoughts on, I guess, just rebranding in general, and how that could play in? Because I think people have a lot of hangups when it comes to it, whether it's the fear of the change, fear of what it looks like on the other side, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I love a rebrand because I just think it's a space to not necessarily reinvent yourself, but to go, what do I want to stand out about my brand? What is the thing that people resonate with that is really true to who we are and how we show up in the world? So whether it's a personal brand and maybe that is a career change, which is a different industry, different life stage. I think a big one is women coming back from maternity leave and maybe wanting, a different balance or a different focus. But I can think of examples at kind of every career stage. And with a company rebrand, just the excitement and the opportunity to build on what you've done, but with a slightly sort of fresh take, different lens.
That's how do you take all this wonderful story and idea and lead other people into that? How are you doing that in that team building as you grow? Because success, I mean, you and Lindsay can't do it all, right? The reality of it. We already talked a little bit about what you gave up, but how do you lead those folks that you're handing things off to?
So yeah, our culture is a huge focus for us. We do a really incredible monthly team meeting where we look at our Gallup strengths, we look at our saboteurs, we look at what we did well, where there's room for improvement, what's holding us back. So the kind of questions we ask clients, we unpack every month as a team. We also have a lot of one-on-one sessions. We love to get outside. So Chloe, one of our team members, and I often go for a run in the forest together. We are having a team get together for the end of the year, and we're doing a beach picnic rather than a restaurant, just so there's more space and time for connection. So I think just being intentional about how we create a culture that is open and warm and aligned to our values. I often say to some of our team, I wish I had the experience you're having now at your age, just that opening their eyes to how they can build their own brands and then getting the kind of in-house support to do that. A lot of our team are part-time, so we're wanting to give them skills and the confidence to take whatever career path they end up doing and hope that Dapper stays part of their journey in some shape or form.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that and understanding of that because, I was thinking, because you reemphasize this again, and it's a different approach for the way I think of that. When we talk about the way I've always heard space used is give me space. I love the way, and I think this is a great reminder and a new way of thinking about it, that you say, we're creating this space so that we can connect and space to do that, as opposed to back off, dude, give me some space. So I think that for me, that was something I learned, is a new way of thinking about space. Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, for me, Emma, you said this talking about a lot of that, fear around the branding, fear around transition, jumping in, and those kind of things. And you use the phrase of the shadow holding you back. And I love that because it really ties into, I guess, Dad, we always say there's lizard brain, monkey brain, caveman brain. I think that's caveman brain probably, where it's the shadow that you think is on the outside of the cave, so you don't want to go out, but it turns out the shadow is just a rock or something like that. Because it's rarely actually the tiger in the bush. Usually it's just the shadow. And so I love the using the word specifically, the shadow holding you back, is usually that's all it is. It's nothing really big there. It's just our fear playing a trick on us. So I really love that.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Emma, how about you? What'd you learn?
So I think something that stood out for me was just the kind of vulnerability around talking about days where I don't feel passionate. It's not always an easy thing to admit, but I hope that it's helpful for people listening to know that even though I love my business to the moon and back, I have those days, and you creating space for me to talk about that was great. So yeah, it reminded me that it's a healthy thing to do, and I appreciated having that space.
Awesome. How do folks find you? Maybe, probably should hire you to help with their personal brand.
So there'll be a link in the show notes to a page where you can get 30% off our online course, as well as our LinkedIn checklist. You're very welcome to download that for free. But I always love connecting with people directly, so please look me up on LinkedIn. My username is Emma Donovan-Dapper, and our website is becomedapper.com.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Emma. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest, Emma Donovan, for joining us today. Remember, you can watch full episodes of the show on YouTube at 10X Your Team. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to pass along with other lifelong learners in your tribe so that they can enjoy it too. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. As always, the full archive of episodes available at www.10xyourteam.net. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next time.